I'd like to call this meeting to order, this regular City Council meeting of Tuesday, April 19th. The clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Wolcott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Biendo.
Here.
Councilmember Tandy.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Winters.
Here.
Thank you.
And if you'll all please rise and join the students of Surprise Literacy Challenge representing Arizona Charter Academy and West Point Elementary Schools leading us in the pledge. Oh, that was great.
Great voices.
Once again, I love that sound. Thank you all for being here and joining us. First, we have a proclamation. We're going to begin tonight by issuing the proclamation to recognize April is Fair Housing Month. Every April, federal housing officials, local communities, and housing advocates across the country commemorate this month to enhance Americans' awareness of fair housing rights and to emphasize the importance of ending housing discrimination. At this time, I'd like to ask Surprise Neighborhood Services Supervisor Christina Ramirez to join me at the podium as we proclaim April as Fair Housing Month. Whereas the Civil Rights Act of 1968, known as the Fair Housing Act, and the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988 ensure full and fair access to housing opportunities, and whereas shelter is a basic human need, and when shelter is denied, the quality of human life is greatly diminished. And whereas people must not be denied equal access to and enjoyment of housing because of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, or disability. And whereas the City of Surprise recognizes and values the efforts of those who seek to identify and eliminate barriers to full and fair housing opportunities. And whereas April is designated as National Fair Housing Month to enhance Americans' awareness of their fair housing rights and emphasize the importance of ending housing discrimination. Now, therefore, I, Sharon Wolcott, as the Mayor of Surprise, do hereby proclaim the month of April as Fair Housing Month in the City of Surprise, Arizona, and encourage all citizens and other community stakeholders to work for tolerance and equal opportunity in our city. Thank you. Thank you. All right, City Manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. I'm going to ask Paul Bernardo, who leads many of the youth programs we have here in the city, to begin a report on the wonderful young people that are with us today. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Wingenroth, Mayor Wolcott, members of the council, and thank you to our Literacy Challenge winning classrooms for leading the pledge tonight. Councilmember Williams and Councilmember Hall helped establish the Literacy Challenge program, and they continue to support it each year. So I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Williams to introduce our special student guests and to recognize their accomplishments. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, guys. Right, paying attention. That's good. Happy to introduce the 4th and 5th grade winning classes from our annual literacy challenge. Incredibly successful this year. 124 classrooms were engaged in a 5-month reading challenge. Myself and Councilmember Hall created this program about 4 years ago to provide our youngest citizens by emphasizing, provide an opportunity to support our youngest citizens by emphasizing the importance of reading, a lifelong skill that will never be outdated as fast as technology may grow, a cornerstone to our own intelligence embedded in reading comprehension. Reading improves concentration, develops our vocabulary and language skills, develops our imagination, helps us to become critical thinkers, and makes us all well-rounded, more successful individuals in school and beyond. Students who participated were asked to track the number of hours they read outside of school from October through February. Teachers kept track of those hours and reported them back to Ms. Deanne Blanford. Thank you, Deanne, for tracking that. She's our Youth Services Program Assistant on behalf of the council who kept a running tally for each of these classes. The winning classes were provided special reading medals, and I see some of you wearing them today. The winning classes were provided special winning, the medals and a pizza party held at their respective schools earlier this month. So tonight we're going to award their first place trophies. We're going to start with the fourth grade class. Miss Vanessa Gore and her students from Arizona Charter Academy. Miss Gore's students read an average of 866 minutes per student each month, which equates to an average of 14 extra hours of reading for each student per month. Congratulations, students, Miss Gore and Principal Heather Henderson. We will also be recognizing our top 5th grade class, students of Miss Laura Frazier from West Point Elementary School. Ms. Frazier's students read an average of 683 minutes per student each month, which equates to an average of over 11 hours of extra reading by each student per month. Congratulations, Principals Tim Brooks, Ms. Frazier, and her 5th grade students. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mayor and Councilmember Hall to join me down the floor as we present their trophies.
Her cell phone.
Right here.
Oh, there it is.
Jojo. There you go. Next year, guys. We're going to get it next year. They're mine next year. I have all 3 classes.
All right, good job. You guys head back to your seat. Hey, Lynn, find a spot.
Can I get a picture?
Mr. City Manager, you had another item?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the council, I have one more item for me, and that is last month you asked staff to do some focused conversation out in the community on a potential bond program to happen in November 2016. And what we are going to be doing is the month of May will be those discussions. We're going to hold 8 community discussions, including a youth discussion. And the first discussion is going to happen on Monday, May 9th in these council chambers. And then we're going to announce the remainder the end of next week. We'll get it out on the web and publicize it as best we can so we can have a robust conversation. But our first meeting will be on Monday, May 9th, right here in the council chambers. Thank you.
And I'm sure that Paul can fill the building with youth. So it'll be a great discussion. Thank you, Bob. City Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report tonight.
City Clerk's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we have a special election coming up on May 17th. And I wanted everyone to know that early ballots will be mailed out tomorrow for this particular election. And we will have a ballot box here at City Hall starting on May 9th through Election Day, which is May 17th. You'll be able to drop off your early ballots. But if you get them in the mail and you vote, please send them in right away. You can mail them right to the county. It's easy to do. And if you don't do it in time, then you can drop it off here at City Hall. The passport services are going really well. We wanted to remind everyone that we do passports here 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. If you have questions regarding your passport or how to obtain a passport, please give us a call at 623-222-1200 to ask any questions regarding this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. And I personally want to thank you. I'm sure the council would add to that I really appreciate you stepping up. I know this has been a really awkward year with the elections this year, and the adjustments to the polling locations created a lot of inconvenience for tens of thousands of people. And you and your staff have agreed to try to help facilitate in this next round to try to make it a little less painful. And I do appreciate you guys going that extra mile. So kudos to you and your staff.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Bet. Call to the public.
I do not have any call to the public forms filled out.
All righty, then we will move to the regular agenda, which includes 10 items on consent. Does any member of council wish to remove any item for further discussion?
Yes. Number 7, please, Mayor.
Councilmember Winters wants to remove 7. Anyone else? No. Councilmember Hall?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to remove item number 9.
Number 9. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for items 1 through 6 and 8 and 10.
Move to approve consent.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve consent with those deletions. All those in favor, all those in favor, please cast your vote.
Unanimous yes vote.
Thank you. We'll go back to item number 7.
And this is discussion and action pertaining to the intent to create a streetlight improvement district. And this is for Austin Ranch Parcel 1.
Good evening, Carl.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Councilmember Winters.
Thanks, Carl. Just a couple of questions on this. I know this Austin Ranches, they haven't even started building yet. And we're talking about slids. Is this the best way to do it before they get in there and build, get it over with?
Yes, sir. What we'd like to do it now is when we have a plat come in is to establish it when there's a primary landowner or property owner. If the land gets distributed among different builders, it splits up. It makes it more complicated, more time consuming on staff and to establish slids for the individual areas. So it's best to cut it off right now. As we have to go back and retrofit other areas like that. It just as petitions are involved, it's just more labor intensive.
I'd like to ask you a broader question about slids. Is there a better way to do this? Have all these slids all over the city? Why can't we just light the city up and everybody pay their fair share?
Yes, somewhere along the way, I guess the city surprised in order to fund maintenance of street lights, the fees involved, just the costs involved, staff members involved. It was just decided to do slids to keep the street lights lit, to keep them maintained. We are aware that maybe there's a more streamlined process, a more aggregate process to make this simpler. We are exploring these items, but as of now, since this is the mechanism that's in place, we're just moving on the best way we can to keep these like we are with Austin Ranch, to keep this as simplified as possible, but to get the mechanism in place to keep the street lights lit and maintained.
So get them when there's only one builder or before they even start building?
I'm sorry, Councilmember.
Get them before they start building, if there's only one builder or a couple of builders.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Cole.
You're welcome.
Unless you want to go door knocking, Councilmember Winters, like others have done. Councilmember, is there any other questions other than Councilmember Winters on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 7.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve item 7 as presented. Seeing no further discussion, would you actually designate this as an actual resolution number?
Yes, thank you.
If you would read the resolution number.
I'd like to approve 2016-37.
Second. Is there a second? Second. A motion has been made and seconded to approve resolution 2016-37 as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 9.
Item 9 is a consideration and action regarding a Series 12 liquor license for Mom's Fixins located at 15266 West Bell Road, and this is formerly known as Marley's, and the applicant is here.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Chief, there was supposed to have been an inspection today, I believe, on the Ansel system at this restaurant. What I read in my notes, how did that inspection go?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Hall, I'm unaware of any scheduled inspection for the Ansel system,
in this facility for today. We've been waiting for a week, if not a little longer than that, to set up an inspection to go through that system with them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was in our packet that they was scheduled today as an attachment. So it was scheduled for the 19th, Tuesday the 19th. Interesting. So you know nothing about it.
No,
so is this restaurant ready to open?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Hall, to my knowledge, the answer is no. There are some still requirements out there, such as submitting to the building department the plans, and for us to come in and actually do the inspection and ensure that the oven equipment and the stove equipment are a match to what the hood system is, which is what you're referring to as the Ansel system.
Yes.
And some other fire code issues that need to be resolved.
Yeah. See, that's fire safety is paramount. In a restaurant, you got to be kidding me. And if that isn't squared away, I am really reluctant to approve a liquor license to this restaurant until they get that handled.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Hall, and I can appreciate your concerns, but I do believe, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but they can still move forward with a liquor license. And I believe they have 60 days, or maybe the city clerk can clarify. I believe they have 60 days in which to become operational. In the meantime, then they still have that time frame to come into code compliance with all the items that we've determined that need to be fixed.
Is that true?
That is correct. As a matter of fact, the liquor license process is separate from what's taking place. When we receive the liquor license in the clerk's office, I have a required amount of time by state law to post that license, and that generates reports coming in from fire and community development and so on. Those requirements will have to be met, but my timeline is different and mandated by the state. So they'll not be able to operate and have that liquor license in place until all those things are met.
So we're not out of sequence approving this with those outstanding issues. Okay.
No, that is correct.
Okay. This is the first time, just so you know, I've been in the city council 8 years. This is the first time that there's been a liquor license in front of us that's had a fire protection issue as part of the notes. First time. And how many restaurants have we opened in this city? A lot of restaurants. So the other, I got another question, and this is for Eric. Okay. The sign on not on the Bell Road side, that looks pretty good, but on the inside of that building, where Marley's sign, the residual of Marley's sign can still be seen. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's the deal there?
We can see if we can talk. I'll talk with code enforcement and see if there's any process by which we can go out there and look at that.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I haven't seen the leftover piece of the sign, but
okay.
I'll get with our code enforcement division. And
could you look at it, Eric? Yeah, appreciate it. Okay.
What's your pleasure, council member?
It's not what my pleasure is. It's what legally we're bound to do. So I'm gonna make a motion to.
Yes.
So if I could, Councilman Hall, these are valid concerns you raise. Be aware that staff has had discussions and meetings on these, and we have other procedures that we go through to ensure fire compliance and other regulatory compliance that are separate and apart from the liquor license application, which is just a recommendation to the liquor board. Okay. So by approving and making a recommendation to approve a liquor license, you are in no way waiving any other regulatory requirement that the city imposes. And as the chief pointed out, the fire code will be complied with prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Okay, I move to approve item number 9, which is approve a Series 12 liquor license for Mom's Fixins LLC located at 15266 West Bell Road, suite number 100, Surprise, Arizona 85374.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve this item as stated. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
That's a unanimous yes vote, and the applicant was here, so your item has been approved, Clarita. And also for Weston Bar and Grill, yours was also approved.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we're going to take item 12 first.
This is consideration and action to approve public service funding priorities for the Community Development Block Grant Program second year annual action plan for year 2016-2017.
Good evening, Christina.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. So today is, I believe, what is the third public hearing as part of the outreach process for the annual action plan that the city has planned for 2016-2017, which is year 2 of our consolidated plan. We're going to be discussing first a public services grant, which is item 12, and then ask for approval of that, and then move on to the annual action plan funding recommendations, which was listed as item 11. So just for public purposes, to give a little bit of background, the City of Surprise is a direct CDBG entitlement community, meaning that we receive funds directly from HUD in order to invest into community type projects. Their yearly funding that we get for the CDBG program is around $500,000, so we received $551,309 last year, and this year we're slated to receive $585,139. That allotment comes to us through a formula. 15% of that allotment can be used for public services, so this year under discussion for public service applications is $87,770. We started the application process in January with first public hearing starting in February and March. And then we presented to council in work session on April 5th, and then we're coming today seeking recommendations for an ultimate submittal by May 16th. The objective of the CDBG funding is to benefit low to moderate income persons. You can either benefit an area, which in Surprise, the original town site is the only area that qualifies for area benefit, or a clientele, which would generally be, people that are homeless, adults with disabilities, and the like. And so if it doesn't meet one of these criteria, it cannot be funded. So we received approximately $124,904 worth of requests through our application process. Again, that started in January. They presented to Planning and Zoning, and then recommendations were made for funding from Planning and Zoning to Council. These recommendations encompass the total $87,770 and would go for Ability 360, which is ADA modifications, Aid to Adoption to Special Kids, which is for the counseling services to families that are looking to foster children, Central Arizona Shelter Services, which is known as CAS, which is a homeless shelter, so they would be billing us for bed nights. Benavia, which provides adult day, child care, and Meals on Wheels. My Kids, which is mentally ill kids in distress, which helps families through counseling and case management for behavioral health for children. And Potter's House, which is going to do some after-school programming in the original town site, as well as some enhancement to the SYEP program. So that is the public services portion, and so we would seek recommendations for the funding and possible approval for this portion of the annual action plan.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to need to recuse myself because I serve on the board of one of these organizations. Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? I have just a question about the CAS services. We are billed for bed nights.
Correct.
For CAS, but where do they house them?
They can be housed in any one of their 5 shelters that they have. They have shelters in the Sunny Slope area and downtown. It depends on the needs of the individual. Some of the shelters are set for families, some are set for male adults, others are set for females. So just depending on the shelter that they are, but they would have to identify themselves as the last residence wasn't Surprise. And so that's how they would identify that they are Surprise residents receiving a benefit, and we're just billed the bed night.
Even if they're physically being domiciled elsewhere,
correct?
They're being billed back to us.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I don't just for further information on this, the amount that they apply for and that we actually award them historically has been less than half of what they truly need or that they actually use in terms of bed nights for Surprise residents, if you will. So,
is it based on a homeless count?
No, it's not based on the homeless count. It's based on they do an intake form and they identify themselves as Surprise residents and such. So I believe that they said that they had over 40-some individuals last time, and so the bed nights were, say, 20 days or such for each person. So,
okay, all right, and so there's at least 3 different types of housing situations,
correct,
depending upon the need of the individuals or family.
Right, their situation.
Great. Any other questions, members? Councilwoman Villanueva.
Yeah, the Potter House. Where is that located?
Presently, it's located in a suite inside where the Crossroads Center is, but I believe that they're looking to modify a building, the one that they're trying to modify on Verde Street. And so, but right now, they are currently providing services out of that suite over in Crossroads.
And the services are what?
They have some after-school tutoring, some kind of peer group mentoring. They help with homework. They help with a lot of different activities. They kind of do like youth building activities. So they are, I know that they're looking to actually expand their programs. And so this is for some of the, computers and other materials that they need. Again, I know them to be in Crossroads now, even though they are looking to outfit a new building.
Yeah.
Any other questions, members? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. So at this time, I will open the public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to come before the council on this item? Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item? Last chance, anyone wishing to speak to the council on this item? I will close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion from the council.
I move to approve recommended public service funding priorities for the Community Development Block Grant Program Annual Action Plan year for 2016 to 17.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve the public service funding priorities for the Community Development Block Grant Program second year annual action plan for the 2016-2017 year as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
Six yes vote, 1 abstain. Councilmember Hall.
Next item.
Consideration and action to approve Consideration and action to approve grant funding priorities for the Community Development Block Grant Program second year annual action plan 2016 and 2017.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. The annual action plan is the plan that we put together on a yearly basis through public input, outreach, and speaking with staff regarding the priorities that we had set under the consolidated plan in order to implement the different priorities, such as this year being neighborhood improvement. The annual action plan is made up of public services, neighborhood improvement projects, and the administration allowed under the grant. Right now, the improvement project that is under consideration is a commercial space expansion that is located within the original town site and is considered an economic development project. So it's basically to increase the commercial space within the original town site. Programs within the Texcelerator include the Beehive, the Global Concierge, workforce development in partnership with the Surprise Resource Center, new startup business demands, and existing program tenants that are expanding. So the strategy here is, as discussed during the work session, is to increase the amount of space available within the Texcelerator that is currently non-usable. They will be using the space that is improved to expand programming. The amount of space that will be added will be anywhere from 5,000 to 13,000 square feet of space on the property. That includes some redesign of layout, paint, floor, carpeting, anything necessary in order to make it usable. And so the anticipated cost is not to exceed the $380,000 available under the grant. So I added a little bit of description here just with regard to the project budget. So neighborhood improvements at $383,441. Public services, which is the portion you just voted on, of $87,770, and the 15% administration of $117,28, for the total grant amount of $585,139. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions, members? I just want to say kudos. Kudos to you and your team. It's just great to see the plan. I'm really pleased to see the dollars going towards really improving just the landscape and showing how things are really coming up for the OTS. It's really terrific. And I really love the presence of the Texcelerator and all of the community activity that's going on in that space. Tremendous. I mean, this is going on in our original town site, but I got to tell you, this is the kind of thing that would rival any community of any size, and it's all going on in the OTS. So kudos to you for putting these kinds of programs together and making it work on a budget of, it's a thin dime, but boy, you sure have made the best of every penny of it. So thank you so very much for putting this together. Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, and just to repeat that, Christina, you continue to do this every year, so well done. Thank you. I move to approve the recommended public service funding priorities for the Community Development Block Grant Program Annual Action Plan 2016-17.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve the Community Development Block Grant Program for the second year annual action plan for year 2016-2017 as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Oops, I'm sorry. We had a public hearing. We didn't take the roll. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak before the council on this item? Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item? Last call. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing and I'll entertain once again the motion.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I just had a question. Are the public services, are we voting on that again? Is that didn't we already vote on that once?
The fact that the public services, that you are going to fund public services as part of this is part of the vote, but you're not voting on who specifically is being funded because you've already done that.
Okay, so
Err on the side of caution.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain.
All right, so Councilmember Hall will abstain on this vote as well. So at this time, a motion has been made and seconded to approve this item as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
6 yes vote, 1 abstained. Hall.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item number 13.
Consideration and action amending the 2016 fiscal budget by reallocating appropriations of $358,200 from grant fund contingency to the finance, water resource management, and information technology departments, personnel and budget, operations budget, resolution 2016-63.
Good evening, Lindsay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. This evening, this amendment is because the original budget for the ERP, the software implementation, was put together before the contract was signed. And so with this amendment, we have a variety of adjustments that align our anticipated expenditures with some of what we are going to actually experience. It includes the reallocation of personnel from the IT department to the finance department. One of the positions that was added for finance rather than both for IT. It also reallocates among the enterprise funds to effectively account for our utility billing component for our utility billing phase. And it also reallocates from professional services, where that budget was again lump summed, to a variety of line items, including the purchase of hardware for the system implementation. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you have.
Councilmember Williams?
Oh, no questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Winters?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lindsay. I have a question. When is it going to take place? When are we going to get our own billing? We're going to do our own billing.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, we are anticipating going live on our utility billing phase, fully independent, as of November 1st. The first bills within November this calendar year.
November 1st this year.
Yes.
I'll tell you, the citizens surprised are really going to like you for that. They may even buy you a drink when they see you at a bar. They've been waiting for a long time, I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Councilmember Dandy?
Thanks. So this request is for this fiscal year, and is the follow-on restructuring, is that in the city manager's recommended budget for next year? Thanks.
Madam Chair, Councilman Tandy, yes, it is.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none? In a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve 2016-63.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve Resolution 2016-63 as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, also Lindsay.
Consideration and action amending the fiscal year 2016 budget by reallocating appropriations of $237,900 to the Enterprise Resource Planning ERP system project for the purposes of incorporating a utility billing module, and this is Resolution 2016-64.
Lindsay.
Madam Chair, members of the council, if you'll recall, back on March 1st, we had a discussion and you provided direction for us to bring utility billing in-house. We reported at that time that we anticipated up to 15 additional new positions would be added to the budget, and an approximate cost that was equivalent to what we estimate paying for this current fiscal year. Since that time, we have been underway with the software implementation and initiating the transition. This amendment will allow us to authorize and add 4 additional FTE starting upon this action to allow us to undertake the hiring of those positions and get a number of those on board to assist in the implementation, one of which is a position within the IT department to help with the technical aspects of it, 3 of those in the finance department, one of which is a rate analyst that we're anticipating to help with some of the data analytics and some of the scrubbing to make sure that we're using sound financial information and sound customer information, as well as the addition of some customer focusing positions to allow us to maintain our current operations with our customer service call center, as well as plan for the implementation of the software. It also authorizes funding for a partial year for those 4 positions. We anticipate them being on board for not more than 2 months of this fiscal year. They will be included in the city manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 2017, including as well as the additional positions outside of these 4. It also allows us to purchase meter reading vehicles and devices. The vehicles themselves have a long lead time on the order and outfitting of those vehicles so that they're ready to go for our meter reading. And with that, I am happy to entertain any questions or comments you have on this item.
Questions, members? Councilmember Tandy?
I move approval of Resolution 2016-64.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve Resolution 2016-64 as presented. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
Unanimous yes vote, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now the main course.
Item number 15, discussion and presentation regarding the city manager's fiscal year 2017 recommended budget.
Good evening, Jared.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, members of the council, before you this evening, we have the fiscal year 2017 City Manager's recommended budget. Last week, we distributed to you this document, the recommended budget, in the white binder. We published it online for public access as well. In addition, we added the line item detail budget to the online publication, demonstrating our continued commitment to financial transparency. In this recommended budget, we would like to thank our City Manager, Bob Wingenroth, for his leadership in helping us guide these conversations and as we develop the budget as a team together, and we'd like to thank him for that. We're also grateful to our department partners who have really invested a lot of time and resources into working with us to put this together. And also, we'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council, for engaging in some tough discussions with us this fiscal year as we've been working together building this budget over the last several months. Tonight, we'll be looking for your feedback on what you have seen before we build the tentative budget. So we'll be bringing the tentative budget to you the first meeting in May. Jared's going to give you a presentation of the balanced budget for the City Manager's recommended budget. And after his presentation, it's a brief overview. My colleagues and I, amongst the department, stand ready to answer any questions or comments you might have throughout the budget document or on Jared's presentation. I'll turn it over to Jared. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Madam Chair, members of the council. We'll start with the bottom line. Total budget recommended for 2017, $298,594,100. That's made up of $268 million of expenses and $30 million of transfers that are really moving funds from between different accounts within the city. The total budget is $298, but the expenses are $268. When we come back with the tentative budget, by state law, we have to adopt the expense amount, not the transfer amount. So the focus on that night will be on the expense amount. But our total budget is $298.6. And before we go too much further, I'd like to start by apologizing. That's probably not a great way to start a presentation, but the recommended books that were distributed a week ago, they included a very consistent error throughout the book having to do with the FTE count, the full-time equivalent position count in each of the departments. In each of the department pages, the 2016 adopted amount did not include any part-time employees or any part-time positions, and the 2017 did. So you'll see some very confusing or large increases year over year due to that error. We're going to be making the correction on the online electronic version tomorrow, so that'll be out there. Obviously too late for the printed copies that you have today. Back to the scripted presentation, we've got the comparison to the 2016 budget, a reduction of expenditures of about $13.1 million, a 4.7% reduction. Transfers increased by about $7 million, a 30.5% reduction. A lot of that increase is due to us moving asset replacement, asset replacement and vehicle replacement, along with the pavement preservation, will all move to the capital improvement plan. That was done with transfers, a lot from the general fund over to the general capital fund, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. Here's the breakdown of the sources of funds for the upcoming year. We're expecting to get about $180 million in revenue. Again, the $30.3 million of transfers within our own accounts, and then use of fund balance of nearly $90 million. Revenues and transfers in total $210 million. And on this next slide, we break that $210 million down between the various sources of revenue. So charges for services is the largest one at almost just over a third of the total sources. Charges for service include our utility fees, so that's why you see such a large number there. Local taxes make up just about a quarter, state share just under 20%, and then the transfers you see there again at the $30.3 million. Property tax, which includes both the general fund, the primary property tax in the general fund of approximately $7 million, along with the Streetlight Improvement District property taxes of just over $2 million. Franchise fees come in at $5.3 million, 2.5%, all seen in the general fund. The operating sources by fund, you see the general fund makes up about a half of total sources of the $210 million. Enterprise funds about a quarter. Special revenue funds really led by our highway user revenue fund in at just over 10%. Capital projects funds at 17.8%. Internal service funds, which are our health care and our risk management funds at 12.6%. And then finally, we have debt service of 3.4%, which is really transfers from other funds. General fund, we saw the $104.1 million on the last page. This is how the sources break down for the general fund in the upcoming year. Just over 40% of sales tax, just under a third for state shared sales tax. Charges for services make up just under 10%. Property taxes you see here at 6.9%. Transfers in of $6.6 million, which is coming from our utilities for indirect costs, as well as in lieu property tax payments and in lieu franchise fees. And finally, you see the franchise fees, the $5.3 million that we talked about a couple slides ago. On the uses side, we'll see here a breakdown of our $300 million budget. We have operating uses of $156.4 million. Again, the transfers out of 30.3. Combined, they make up our operating budget at about $186.7 million. You see a capital improvement plan of $55 million, contingency at $49 million, and debt service at just under $8 million. The operating uses, taking that $186.7 million, breaking it down, almost half of it is for personnel costs, 30% for services, transfers out again at $30.3 million, and supplies at $10.7 million. Operating capital at just $1 million. Breaking that down by fund again, you see 60% is for the general fund, enterprise fund just under a quarter, special revenue funds under 20%, or I'm sorry, under 10% of the total, internal service funds, and our capital projects funds, rounding it out. Taking the general fund uses that you saw on the previous page, you see the general fund, which is where all of our discretionary dollars that we can use for any it's really our unrestricted funds that we can use for any purpose within the city. You see that two-thirds, or just under two-thirds, is personnel, $72 million. Services at $23.6 million. Our transfers out, which we'll detail that a little bit in a couple slides, $12 million. Supplies at $4.8 million. And operating capital of $700,000. So the 2017 recommended budget, the ongoing uses you see that we have, our ongoing uses that we reported at the last meeting of $99.5 million. We have recommended ongoing of $2.4 million. That includes the first year of our public safety initiative that we've been talking about, along with some other additions that we've added to the budget. Of that recommended ongoing, about $1.6 million is for the public safety. We're phasing that in so that we can also afford the equipment associated with that. One-time uses of $1.7 million. A big chunk of that, of course, is the equipment I just spoke about for the public safety initiative items. We have a one-time transfer for vehicle replacement of $2.7 million, asset replacement $3.7 million, and pavement preservation of $300,000. And then we have additional capital improvement plan transfer of $2.8 million. All of those transfers, they end up going to the general capital fund for those purposes. That gets us to our total of $113.1 million for the general fund. Walking through the fund balance for the general fund, we begin with a $29.5 million fund balance. We have operating sources of $104.2 million, operating uses of $113.1 that we broke down on the last page. We have contingencies for economic development and unforeseen contingency, both at $1 million, which is consistent with what we have done in the past. Additionally, at this point, the recommended budget has about $400,000 of additional fund balance contingency. We're going to talk through a couple items as we go through this presentation of where we would like to place that contingency, to utilize that contingency by the time we get to the tentative budget. That brings us to the ending fund balance of $18.2 million, which is what our new reserve level will be for the general fund, which is about an $800,000 increase over the previous fiscal year. We'll give you some highlights on some of the other major operating funds. So Highway User Revenue Fund, the sources are going to be up. Revenues are going to be up about 6% this year. A lot of that is because of the revisions that we're seeing to all of our state share revenues due to the census changes. On the uses side, landscape maintenance, we're increasing our funding for landscape maintenance for the upcoming year. We also have almost $1.8 million of pavement preservation within the Highway User Revenue Fund. The total is going to be $4.5 million, $1.8 coming from Highway User. We had another $300,000 coming from the General Capital Fund, and the rest will be funded from our Transportation Improvement Fund. This next item, we've got key issues, and we'll have this for each of the other operating funds that we're covering tonight. This is kind of giving you a heads up of some future items that will be impacting these, not necessarily for the recommended or even the adopted budget that we'll have this year, but they'll have impacts in future years. So for the Highway User Revenue Fund, one of the key issues is the stormwater utility. The creation of the stormwater utility will actually allow us to move some expenditures out of the Highway User Revenue Fund to the Stormwater Utility Fund, freeing up funds for potential other discussions for pavement preservation or other types of service out of the Highway User Revenue Fund. Next up, we have the sanitation operations. The key thing here, no rate increase is recommended for the upcoming fiscal year. A couple of the increases that we're seeing, landfill fees, vehicle maintenance, vehicle and can replacement, along with the utility billing transition that Lindsay talked with you a couple of minutes ago. A couple of the key issues that we have here, rising cost of vehicles. The vehicle costs have increased from when we last did our rate study. So that's putting some pressure on the fund balance in the sanitation operations fund. So we'll probably be returning to you with some discussions about that in the future. Also, the public works yard. When we get later into the CIP discussion, you'll see that we don't have funding in there for the public works yard. Sanitation is one of the areas that would be funding a portion of that public works yard. So any discussion with the public works yard is going to impact our sanitation operations fund. Water operations has included an 8.25% rate increase that was adopted by council a couple of years ago. Major increases there are seen literally for asset equipment and vehicle replacement, utility billing transition, and costs associated with the training center, getting that up and running. Some of the key issues, mostly on the capital side, that we're seeing in the water operations is arsenic treatment expansion. This is something obviously we have to keep on top of. So making sure that we have the funding in place for arsenic treatment expansion. Also water acquisition, some of the things that Terry has been talking with you over the last year or so on water acquisition. And then meter replacement, looking for some improved technology for some automated meter reading in that area. Those three issues will also, like we had talked about with sanitation, those are three issues that those capital items could put some pressure on this fund. So we'll have to return to you to talk about the planning of those items as we go forward. Finally, you have wastewater operations, no rate increase recommended. You'll see the uses, same issues that we saw on the water side, asset, equipment, and vehicle replacement, utility billing, and funding the training center, getting it up and running. Key issues here, recharge expansion, making sure that we can get rid of our water after we've treated it, having a place to put that. And then wastewater has an issue with debt service. So we have some debt service that we issued for the expansion of our south plant back in 2007. At that time, we thought our growth numbers would be quite a bit higher, and we'd have more development impact fees to help us fund those debt service payments. That's kind of been an issue over the last 5 years and will remain as we go forward. So we'll have some discussions with you regarding what we could plan on doing with debt service payments or borrowing in general. Next up, we'll talk about the capital improvement plan. This slide here shows you the breakdown, $55 million, about just over 50% of that is carry forward items going into next fiscal year. For the recommended budget and for the tentative budget, what we do for carryover is we actually, or carry forward, we look at what's been spent as of April 1st, and we take a snapshot of that, and we say we're going to carry forward all of the funding that hasn't been spent as of April 1st. This sets a higher bar for our total appropriation amount that we will carry through our tentative budget, because the tentative budget sets the maximum that we could possibly adopt. After we go through the tentative budget, we will go through and reevaluate our carry forwards, bring them down as of expenditures as of probably May 1st. You'll see some of those numbers coming down quite a bit. And as we go through the next couple slides, you'll see some of the obvious areas that we're going to see some of those expenditures come down as we go through. So breaking down the capital improvement plan, we have pavement preservation, asset replacement, and vehicle replacement at the top at $4.5 million for pavement, $6.8 million, and $10.5 respectively for asset and vehicle replacement. Those are citywide numbers. Those include our utilities. You see that the new funding in those areas, we have a little bit of carry forward in the asset replacement, about $600,000, mostly to do with dispatch radios or dispatch consoles and radio replacements within police. On the vehicle replacement, you see we have some carry forward there, about $4 million. A lot of that having to do with either fire truck replacements or sanitation truck replacements, because those they have a long lead time, and they take, in some cases, more than 1 year after order before they are received. So we'll have to carry some of those funds into the next fiscal year. Transportation, the recommended budget has $6.5 million, $800,000 of new funding. The majority of that new funding is associated with the Civic Center North project, so the section that is north of this facility to Bell Road. General government, most of the new funding, in fact, all of the new funding having to do with higher education facilities. We have public safety, you see here, with $0 showing we would like to, for the tentative budget. We know there are discussions going on regarding a potential bond. We have some public safety projects included in that discussion. For the tentative budget, though, we'd like to include the public safety master plan that was discussed when we talked about the public safety projects. It was really the #1 priority. We would like to include that as part of our tentative budget when we bring that back to you in May. Parks and Recreation, $3.3 million. That entire amount is the carry forward for the clubhouse renovations. We would expect that to be spent by June 30th, maybe a few invoices outstanding. Utilities, $18.2 million. About 14 of that is carry forward, $4 million in new projects. Some of that having to do with arsenic treatment. Total $55 million new funding, just under half of that total at $25.6 million. Key point on the ERP that we had talked about earlier, just to be clear, that budget for 2017 includes adding an additional staff member. Really, the idea is that we want to try to capture some of the costs of our staff implementing that project. So there's an administrative specialist within the HR department that is included as part of this project. Also, based on tonight's action for the tentative budget, we're gonna increase that budget by $865,000. That was not included as part of the carry forward because it didn't exist at the time when we put the recommended budget together. So we will make that adjustment as well. Debt service. Governmental debt service for the 2015 bond. This is for both the refinance of the 2003 items, largely for the stadium, and then also for the issuance last year, which was for the clubhouse renovations. $3.4 million of total debt service for that item. This is funded by the general fund, about $1.4 million. We have 4 different development impact fees, police, fire, parks, general government. They're pitching in $1 million in total. We have the spring training ticket surcharge and the tourism fund that are together also pitching in an additional $1 million towards that debt service. Tourism makes up about $400,000, and as the policy that council revised last year, that is 75% of the total collections expected for next fiscal year. We have proprietary debt both for 2007 and 2015. The 2015 is really the refinancing of debt from 2003, the actions that were taken by council last year. So those are paid for with the sewer development impact fee fund and the wastewater operations fund, $4.4 million. Total debt service payments for the upcoming year expected at $7.8 million. Contingency, $49 million, and you see this broken out by fund. General fund, $2.4 million. That included both the economic development and the unforeseen contingency items, along with the $400,000 of fund balance contingency that we would like to dedicate towards both the public safety plan and then making the ERP whole from the actions that we did tonight. From there, you see special revenue funds, $3.1 million, capital projects funds, $22.1 million. A lot of that is development impact fee fund dollars that aren't designated for a project and will be used in future years as enough collections come in order to fund projects. Enterprise funds of $12.9 million. We have internal service funds, $3.5. Grants, $5 million. This is for unforeseen grants. So we have an unforeseen revenue. So if new grants come in, we would come back to council and say, we would like to tap this unforeseen revenue and use the contingency within the grants fund in order to fund those items. Finally, we've got the reserve items. General fund at $18.2 million. As I said before, an increase of about $800,000. Spring training ticket surcharge set at $600,000, which is 1 year of debt service as set up last year. Tourism, $5,000, so that rounds down to zero, but it's a $5,000 policy item that we have in there. General capital fund, $1 million. Transportation improvement, $500,000, also policy. Then sanitation, water, and wastewater, again, based on the policies that we have in place. Those amounts you see before you. Employee health care, we've got set in the recommended budget at 2.2%. We'll talk about that here in a second. And finally, risk management at $300,000. Total reserves at $35.1 million. And with the financial policy updates, we have a couple updates that we're recommending. First, we want to update any reference to the transient lodging tax. We have some in our policy for tourism, for instance. It's referring to the transient lodging tax. When we came before you last time, we had not yet adopted the new rate. So we'd like to go through and obviously update those to what the appropriate rate is. The second item, though, is the increase in the healthcare trust fund reserve from 10% to 25% of expected claims. And that was reflected in the number that you saw on the previous page. So some of the outstanding revisions that we see between now and when we either have to do the tentative budget or the final budget. First, update the ERP based on tonight's action. The public safety master plan, include that in the tentative budget. Update carry forward amounts. That will occur for the final budget, not for the tentative budget. We'd like to keep that window a little bit higher during the tentative budget because that really sets our limit. We can't go any higher than what the tentative budget is, but we can go lower. Additionally, we have contingency for a potential bond election. Last year, we included about $6 million in unforeseen revenue contingency, much like the grants. So if a potential bond election were to occur, we could come back to council, and if it was successfully passed through the voters, we could come back to council and tap some of that contingency in order to begin design of those projects. Some of the calendar dates, May 4th, we have the tentative budget adoption. We're also bringing the fee schedule adoption, specifically the solar fees that were tied to a building inspector addition. We also have some fire inspection fees that are tied to some part-time inspection dollars. And we also have the regional, increasing our dial-a-ride fees to match the regional amounts. That will also be tied to an increase in our Sunday, adding a Sunday service. Sales tax rate adoption. So this is the discussion we've been having about including a food tax, reducing the sales tax. We'll need to come back on the 17th and have that discussion and make an adoption of the rate if we want to have that in place by August 1st. We also will bring back the Marley Park tentative budget at that time. Final budget adoption will be on June 7th. We'll also do Marley Park final that day. Property tax levy adoption, both for the city and Marley Park, will occur on June 21st. With that, are there any questions or comments?
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jared, Lindsay. Appreciate it. You've walked us through this process for months now, so I appreciate it. And this is I like the online version. Mm-hmm. I'm technically savvy, Council Vice Mayor. Just one thing I'd like to take a closer look at as you get into discussions and the city manager. Oh, there he is. That you walked out and you were fed up with everybody. You alluded to getting out into the community and talking about a bond, and one of the things that I'd like to have a discussion on simultaneous to all that, and even May 4th, when we look at transportation and we look at, again, and it seems the past couple weeks, it's been deja vu for me in terms of the topics that are coming back to the table, specifically within my district, but citywide, those gaps. And we talked about the previous gap studies, and I had a conversation with a woman the other day on medians, specifically medians on Waddell and medians on Northwest Ranch Parkway that have just not been landscaped, and now they're full of weeds. The bottleneck roadways that we see on Waddell and Greenway, some of those are in the queue, and our bond committee went through a lot of that and kind of prioritized. I'd love for us to have that discussion in terms of prioritization of some of those roads. And we have in the past, but really getting into some of those details. And I know Public Works and Mike Gent and their team is great in terms of the customer service they provide when folks are going, why isn't this roadway built? And kind of giving that explanation of, as an example, Waddell Road, when you get off the 303 and you start heading east, it's a country road. It's Prasada, it's farmland there, and really that corner intersection of Saraville and Waddell is deteriorating, and it has so, and it's as traffic increases, that queue gets backed up to the 303 from Saraville on those peak hours, peak times. And at the end of the day, you never spend more, and I time it. The worst traffic conditions that we have on the west side of town anyway, I don't spend more than 3 or 4 minutes waiting to get past that intersection. That's the reality of it. But it's time, it's money, it's quality of life, and it's only going to get worse. So if we can have that discussion simultaneous to going out to the community, and if some of those prioritizations, that discussions can take place, getting staff input on here's this road, this is emergency conditions, we need to address this first, and kind of go through that. And then in terms of everybody wants the road in their backyard fixed, obviously, but I'd just love to revisit that as we get into this process. Should that be a component of a obligation bond? So thank you guys.
Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. You certainly gave us enough to digest, Jared and Lindsay. I've started reading it. I haven't read all of it yet, but I'm giving it a good shot. I got a couple of general questions for you before we actually get to the meat of this thing. On page 20, it says your budget overview. You've got a notation there of donations, $505,600, but you got expenses connected to that to $497,000. So how do you get expenses from a donation? I'm sure you have a good answer, but
Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, really what we're doing is we have some donations that we have really already received, and they're sitting in the bank. We're expecting to get more donations. We have to budget for some expenses within that donations fund in order to spend those donations. If we don't have an expense set up, a budget for that expense, we would not be able to spend it. What you'll also see is you'll see some of that dollars is in contingency over on page 21. You'll see that. Right. Anytime we would need to spend that contingency amount, obviously we'd have to come back to council for that. There are some items within the individual departments that they have identified they'd like to spend those donations on, or they may have some donations that are earmarked for specific things. They've been given a donation and told use it for these items. So we budget for the expense so that we can spend the donations.
Okay, good.
And Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, another large component of that is the sponsorship dollars for the Recreation Department. They're also within that donations fund.
Okay. Now, still on page 20, where it's talking about the ground ambulance service, that's a new service we have. It's not even a year old, I don't believe. We got $1,505,000 and some change out of that already this year, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, for the ground ambulance service, right now we're tracking the revenue collections. We have one ambulance in service. For the upcoming year, for fiscal year 2017, we have planned to add as many as two additional ambulances into service. However, if you look, we've placed them into contingency because we need to see all of the revenues coming in, making sure that everything is coming in as planned before we actually add another ambulance into service. What you're seeing in that $1.5 million includes some unforeseen revenue, kind of like we're doing with the grants. So if we see the revenues coming in for this first one, as we're expecting, we'll come back in the fall and say, we'd like to add a second one, have a budget amendment that would take some contingency, place that into the budget for expenditure. We would also then take some of that unforeseen revenue and say, that's going to be real ground ambulance revenue.
But my point is it's doing really well for a new program. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, it's doing really well. the one challenge that we knew we were always going to have was the timing of when the revenue was going to come in and the amount of the collections that we were going to get. So for every bill,
after you invoice it.
yeah. So after we send a bill out, we're monitoring what percentage of those do we receive back, what percentage of what we billed do we receive back based on what insurance companies will pay us, and also the timing. So we bill for a transport that occurs maybe October 1st, and we might not see that revenue until March. So right now we're still trying to make sure the timing of that revenue is going to work out for us, so that it's going to come in as the numbers are coming in as expected, but the revenue is delayed at this point. So until we can see a good history of that revenue coming into our coffers, not just the bills going out, we're being a little cautious before we add that next ambulance.
Okay, one final question for now. On this, you have zero revenues for Proposition 400. I know the West Valley got cut out of that Proposition 400 back in 2009, whenever it was. What's the chance of us getting some of that money back in the West Valley? Anybody know the answer to that?
Councilmember, that is probably a discussion for another day. That's another strategy that we need to work together on with our Public Works folks and our Intergov department, and make sure that we are in touch with the agencies as to how we're going to go about seeing what we can't get out of that redisbursement.
That's it for now, Jared. Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah. Just in general, Jared and Lindsay, there's been a big improvement in the financial clarity of the budget. I know you made a mistake here and there. Okay, that happens. But just in general, this budget has been easier to read than in the past, and it's easier to follow the bouncing ball. And so I really commend you on that. And also I commend both of you on having the patience with me on some detailed questions, that I didn't quite understand. But the couple of things I had questions about, and I think is Eric here? Eric, I had a question, Eric. And it has to do with building inspector. We're adding a building inspector, and yet it doesn't show really much increase in plans reviewed or inspections made in terms of 16 versus 17. So why are we adding a building inspector?
Mayor, Councilmember Hall, there's actually been quite a bit of increase in inspections. While the permits may be down slightly, however, the inspections have increased. In fact, I have the numbers right here. In FY16 to this date, we're at 15,038 inspections. In FY16, sorry. When you compare that to FY13, which was that one bubble year, we only had 14,824 inspections total for that entire year. The other item we have is specifically what the inspections entail. Right now, and we probably have more than this, but in December at the general plan update, we kind of gave an update on the amount of commercial permits that have been issued. We're at 1.1 million square feet. So what the comparison is, we've had an uptick in commercial, while the residential has been kind of up to this time this year a little stagnant. Part of the reason why the residential has been stagnant is because all of our finished lots have basically been dried up. In fact, we've been taking multiple final plats to council, gearing up more development. Just as an example, specifically the Asante development. So Asante has come back online, and they were gauging about 6 homes per month. In the first month that they were open, they sold 16. So we feel that we're going to see those inspections increase. And then if you look at just this year from January on, we're a little bit lower. But if you look at the fiscal year from March, April last year to this year, we're actually right in line. So what we have here is we have an increase in commercial, but also we have an increase in what those inspections are. We assign work hours to every single inspection. So as another comparison between FY13 and FY16, currently total work units that we have are about 47,000. In the entire year of FY13, we had 43,000. So we're actually up 4,000 more. So that's one of the reasons to bring on the other inspector. The other reason is specifically for level of service. Currently, we try to provide the best level of service possible. We feel that bringing on this extra inspector will keep that level of service consistent.
See. Okay. Do you have any inspectors that are looking at retiring?
That is another item, Mayor, Councilmember Hall. We have 2 of our senior inspectors that will be retiring in June, so we'll be bringing on 2 more. So we're going to have a little bit of lag on that as well. But we've been working with finance and HR specifically to see if we can bring those 2 on with a week or 2 left with our other inspectors, so that we're able to have a nice transition.
Okay. The SUDC planning consultant. What's going to be the end product of that consultant?
Mayor, Councilmember Hall, basically what we had one of our long-range planners leave us this year. So we had a little bit of lag in bringing on another planner. So what we did was we pulled in a contract planner off of an existing contract that we have through IPM. One of the things that this contract planner is working specifically with our long-range planner on developing our new SUDC, or at least the update to the Surprise Unified Development Code. So over this next year, the goal is to have the full code. I mean, we'll be taking in chunks to council, but have the full code developed by July 2017, so that way we're able to have it in for public consumption and so forth. So that's one item that this contract planner will be working on. The other item is we have some planning and engineering design standards that we're looking at unifying our design standards with engineering. Currently, with the planning design standards and some of the engineering design standards, there's a little bit of disconnect, but we've been working very closely with engineering group and public works specifically on trying to unify those design standards. So this person will also be working on that. So we're looking at 2 major products coming out of this specific item. One of the things that I've seen in my career specifically, if we had contracted out for the SUDC update or even these engineering design standards, we'd probably look at about $300,000 to $400,000 in funds that we need to allocate for a specific consultant to manage that, plus having our own manager kind of in-house managing that consultant. So what this would do is essentially save us probably $250,000 to $300,000 without having to go out to fully have some consultant kind of go through the code.
So is it me as an applicant, if I come into the city, this is going to make my process smoother and more transparent? And will it move along quicker? I mean, what's going to be the result from the other side of the counter?
Mayor, Councilmember Hall, that's exactly it. Currently, the way our code's kind of written, we have some disconnects within the code. We have some issues with the code not agreeing with one another. We have issues with our code not agreeing with engineering standards. So the idea is that, we've kind of went through the general plan process. The next piece is the zoning piece, and then you get into the actual design standards. And since we're doing this all at once, we feel that the disconnects will be less, so we have less way of interpretations, which actually provides, customers coming over the counter, here's the rules, not, here's the rules, but this one doesn't agree with this one, and we need to interpret this. So the idea is to make more streamlined, more customized, and to allow us to have better interpretation at the counter.
Okay. And then the Master Arts Plan, that's going to facilitate us being able to make more cohesive decisions about art throughout the city?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Hall, exactly it. One of the reasons to do the arts plan is specifically to identify funding sources as well as where we're going to put those funds.
Okay. Thanks, Art. The other economic development, on the economic development piece, I just want to make sure, there's a couple of things. Rick, can I ask you a question, Rick? I just have two questions about economic development. One is, I just want to make sure that, the investment we're putting in the tech accelerator this last year and the upcoming year, we're going to do. I just want to make sure that we're mission clear about what we're doing at the tech accelerator. That's a job creator. It's an entrepreneurial environment. And that's why we did what we did originally, and we want to keep it that way. The fact that we have a CAP office in there is temporary. Right, Rick?
That's correct.
Okay. And so our plan is to move the CAP office into another facility and use that space for job creation, entrepreneurial environment.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Hall, yes, that's exactly the plan. But also add to that we're doing something very unique that no other social service agency, if you will, is doing is we're adding the workforce development piece to this, which is a huge driver and a nice magnet for people coming to town looking for a qualified workforce. So we're doing two things at the same time.
Okay.
But, the reality is, Councilmember Hall, that as that program grows and as Seth leads that, it's going to outgrow that space.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I know you've been doing a lot of pick and shovel work in Canada.
Yes.
Okay, both you and Janine have spent a lot of time there. You've developed some really, I think, pretty good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But as an outsider, as a resident, what's that doing for me? Where are the results?
Well, as you know, it takes a while to build those relationships, and that's what we've done last year. In fact, we have a potential locate that's in town today. It's a cybersecurity firm under non-disclosure, but they're here, and they're going to be here for the next 3 days. We have another, I'm just giving you some examples, a car manufacturer that's well, they're not a full car manufacturer. They make carbon fiber technology and is working with some major companies where they are looking for U.S. manufacturing here. So we've got the one part where we're looking at bringing manufacturing here, and that's one of the pieces of the Canadian effort is to bring manufacturing here, gets them across the border, gets them across some of the border issues, gets them in our foreign trade zone, which is very, very unique in what we do. Arizona's unique in that aspect, where your foreign trade zone gets a 75% reduction in real property tax. So that's a nice thing. The other is just the reality in foreign trade, foreign direct investment. So if you think about it, 95% of the world's population is outside the U.S. That represents 80% of the world's purchasing power. You couple that with working in Toronto, where you have the world's most ethnically diverse city. We're not talking about just Canada. In fact, we have people come from Singapore later in May. Okay. Probably 10 different countries. So if we're not at the table, we're not having those conversations, they don't know who Surprise is and bringing forward. So we have quite a few kicking the tables. We're working with REITs, real estate investment trusts. They're multi-billion-dollar companies that have taken a good hard look at us. But Councilmember Hall, I won't sit here and tell you I can give you a guarantee when, where, because that's one of the fallacies in economic development is that we make that decision when they come here. That's a decision that's actually made by the private sector.
Sure.
So our job is to make a very welcoming environment, let them know we're here, and do everything we can to get them to be here and create those head of household jobs that the council very rightfully wants.
Okay. And just, it's a big part of our budget process.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that it's just all about justifying what we do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Hall, I think that point is, and here's another fallacy, is that it's so expensive to go there. It actually is more expensive for us to do trips into the LA market than it is to Toronto.
Is that right?
So the plane flights, we've gotten very, very creative. We stayed at, I think our hotel was about $98 a night. You look in LA, it's going to be $200-$300 a night.
You're right.
The plane fares are very comparable. So
well, our exchange rate comes into play. That
absolutely, it sure does. Right. Excellent point. So they're down about 30%.
Okay, super. Thanks, Rick.
Yes. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, that's good. I had one other area that I wanted to ask about, and that is Terry. I got a question in your area. Yeah. That is, you show quite a significant reduction in chemical supplies. Why?
The chemicals for water, I'm presuming that's what you're looking for. Year over year, the arsenic treatment for one of our facilities does not need to be replaced every year. And so we've been carrying that money year over year and then showing a savings year over year. We just wanted to be accurate and say, okay, this year we don't need to apply the chemicals for Roseview in particularly, and next year we'll.
So it's not the amount of chemicals; it's the dollars that we're just carrying.
It's the dollars that would need to be expensed for those chemicals year over year.
Okay, and what about on page 151? You talk about the arsenic sludge that doesn't have to be removed from Ashton Ranch.
That's correct. That's actually a savings that we realized by actually just putting a 20-foot piece of pipe and sending the sludge to the sewer plant. There's some savings there. Our plant is robust enough to take that. Good job. And we had some savings.
Good job, Terry. Okay, that's all I got. And I just kind of recapping, see if I'm wrong here. So I want to we got 24 positions that are funded by our option 2, correct? Public safety. Public safety. Okay. Then we've got 11 that we're adding for billing operations.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Which we're going to save that money by not paying the outside contract.
Yes.
So it's pretty much a wash.
Yes.
Pretty much. Okay. And then we're adding 6 positions. That one is in fleet, information technology, human resources, community development, finance, and the senior center. Is that right? Those are the 6. So that's our total FTE impact, correct? In the general fund. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Hall, we also have a process and policy analyst within fire that we're converting from existing part-time dollars.
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
that's
so it's
right.
a zero
He
dollar
was,
add.
Yeah, he was temporary part-time, and we're putting him to permanent part-time.
So this is within the finance department. That position's vacant at present. It was part-time, so we're converting those part-time dollars to full-time and then using some of our operating funds to shore up the difference.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and then also we've got a total of $55.2 million that we're using in capital improvement. Correct?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
21.8 million of that is in communications, facility, information technology, recreation, utility infrastructure. That's 6.8 million of it, right? Okay, and then we've got 10.5 million of it is for aged vehicles, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and then 4.5 million is pavement preservation.
Yes.
Right? So those are all beneficial. The way I see this, you guys, right now, is that we are going through a knothole as a city. Okay, because we have put off investing in our infrastructure for a few years. And granted so, it was fiduciary responsibility that we did that. Okay? But now we're coming out and we're catching up with a lot of capital improvements that have been put off a little bit. Am I wrong? Okay. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of going through this knothole this year. This isn't going to be an ongoing capital improvement budget. We're spending a lot more this year than we typically would spend, just because we're playing catch up. Correct? Is that kind of what you see, Jared? You're really not nodding your head. You're thinking, what's the matter?
Madam Chair,
disagree?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Hall, we will have ongoing needs to continue to invest in our pavement preservation, our asset replacement, and our vehicle replacement. And so those numbers will continue to exist year over year.
Right. And that's and we need that. That's no. What do we got? 1,451 lane miles of road in this city. I mean, we got a lot of lane miles. Mm-hmm. We got to take care of it. And we're getting to that age, where it's just starting to, if we don't, boom, we're going to get this going. And then we're going to have to replace pavement. So we don't want to do that. Other than that, that was, we figured out the rest of the things, I think, that was kind of, I had questions about. But I really appreciate all your work, you guys. I really do. And keep up the good work. And we just need to, we need to make this a great city. And I think we're on our way. We got a lot to do, but I think we're on our way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Biondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bear with me. I'm going to jump around a little bit, and Councilmember Hall touched on some of these that I think I want to probe a little bit more. I think it's fair to say that for our city our size, we run a pretty lean organization. But that having been said, I think there are some things that maybe we might want to take a look at. First, let me talk about pavement preservation. Over the past, from last year to this year, counting HERF funding, what's the increase for pavement preservation? As I recall, last year we found an additional $200,000-300,000 to add to pavement preservation to help in that catch-up process to which he referred earlier. What's the increase, the net increase, if you will, this year in pavement preservation, counting HERF funding? Is that figure available at all?
I don't have it at my fingertips.
Mike, you're the perfect person to answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
So during FY16, 3.7 million is budgeted for pavement preservation. So 4.5 million is an increase over this year. In the last 5 years, we've averaged about 1.8 million per year.
Okay. So we're going from 3 point something to 4 point something?
Correct. So we went about 1.8 million a year with about our average going forward. And last year, thanks to this council, and we were able to increase FY16, our current budget, to 3.7 million. And then going forward, FY17 recommended budget is 4.5 million. So keeping that increase and adding some to it.
And that's helping in our catch-up process.
Absolutely. And really, this is taking care of the responsibility we should be taking care of this year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let me talk about FTE a little bit. How much of the increase in personnel costs can be attributed specifically to benefits? Is there a percentage? Is there a figure? And again, I'm not asking that you give me, I apologized earlier that I didn't have a chance to touch base with you before the meeting, but these are some of the kinds of things if you can bring forward at a later time. I think it's important for us to know what increases we're experiencing in the benefit package, because that, as I read it, that's all wrapped up in those personnel costs. And I think I think we need to be aware of what percentage of that is specifically for the benefits package. I think Councilmember Hall talked about the 24 public safety and the additional FTE offset by the decrease in the billing contract and so on. Is that a complete wash?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Biondo, we anticipate the ongoing costs to be approximately equivalent to what they are currently. Okay. There are some one-time costs that we will incur associated with startup that will exceed that amount next year.
Okay, thank you. The other thing related to FTE, and again, this is something not for now, but for later, but I think it's important for us to know. A couple of things, it seems to me, council, and there are a couple of instances, I think the management analyst position is one example of it. Council approves almost mid-year or partial year, approves a position. It's fundamentally a full FTE. That's redundant, I'm sorry, it's an FTE. Yet, the position isn't funded on a fiscal year full FTE basis. So it seems that every time we as council approve an FTE mid-year, we need to understand that that's only funded for 3 months or 6 months or however long left in that fiscal year, but it's not funded for the subsequent year. And I think that's a consequence that we need to look at each time we fund a position mid-fiscal year or sometime during the current fiscal year. And as I read through this budget, and I agree with Councilmember Hall, it's becoming clearer and clearer to me. That's a credit to both of you by putting together a budget that we really can read pretty effectively. But I think that's an important point. So when I would just encourage, when positions are brought forward to council for approval during the current budget year, that be fully explained, that the funding only exists for that period of time left in the fiscal year, and not for the subsequent fiscal year. And maybe the assumption is that it won't become part of the base, but if the assumption is that it will become part of the base, then we need to understand what that full funding will be for subsequent years. Another area in the way of FTE, I'm really happy you can't see my notes up here, so you would understand why I'm jumping around, because they're kind of scribbled here and there. Unfilled positions savings. How many unfilled positions do we have? For how long have those positions been unfilled? And at what point do we make a judgment that if the position is unfilled for a year, year and a half, given the current market, maybe we don't need the position? So why should we continue to accrue those savings if we don't need the position and we haven't needed it for a year and a half? Is there any policy within your operations that address the issue of unfilled positions and length by which we hold unfilled positions?
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Biondo, we do not have a standard policy with respect to that. We can pull that information on how many are vacant and for how long, but I can say that as we go through the budget development process, that is something that we look at and observe. If they have been vacant for an outstanding amount of time, we would initiate a conversation with the department in question and determine the needs for that position as part of the process. But we don't have a formal policy.
I would appreciate it as you sort through all that you make council aware of that whole sorting out of unfilled positions and where they are and for how long, and that kind of data I think would be helpful. If I can have just a couple more minutes.
Certainly.
Capital projects. We have $55 million roughly of funded capital projects going into this year. I think I asked this question last year, even though the projects certainly will differ considerably in type and scope and so on. But I asked the question last year, if we have $55 million of funded projects and a bond issue is passed of $60 million, do we have the capacity, staff capacity, if you will, to manage over $100 million of capital projects during the course of a year to a year and a half to 2 years? And again, that may not be a question you can answer right now, but I think it's a consideration that we need to have. If one adds another $60 million worth of capital projects, do we need additional staff? Do we have staff capacity to manage those additional projects? I don't have a preconceived answer to that. I'm simply asking the question. One last thing, I think. You notice how carefully I said I think. Completely unrelated to FDE. There were some funds allocated for the proposed Regional Veterans Center. I'm not sure I saw a figure of the amount for that, and I think a month or so ago we asked about the possibility of maybe having Steve Yamamori coming in to brief us on the status of the Regional Veterans Center. Are the other cities contributing to that? If they are, how much? What is our fee? Those kinds of things. So again, it's not something necessarily needs to be addressed now, but I think it would really be important for us to be briefed on that status, cost, participation by other cities, et cetera.
Mr. Wigginroth.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Biondo, in your budget, we have budgeted $50,000 for this current year, but as you said, the ask for the Veterans Center and how it's going to move forward is still developing. But from the initial discussions, it seemed like it'd be prudent for us to set aside the $50,000 because we would probably then be able to at least initiate a partnership with the region to be able to move forward on it.
Yeah, and I certainly encourage that. I just think we need the basic information.
Is that it? That's at the end of yours.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Tandy.
Thank you. I think I've got 3 bullet points, so hopefully I'll be quick. The first item, I really appreciate the help that staff has been able to pull together some charts for my residents. We do this every year and update it after we make our decisions in June as a council. It basically is a comparison of the property tax rates to other jurisdictions, the sales tax rates, debt per capita. And what will be interesting for me is we're adding a couple dozen positions, most of it public safety related. Right now, that I don't know if that'll impact it or not, but right now we are the lowest employee to resident ratio in the entire West Valley, and I believe we're second only to Gilbert. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that update is. And I'm not asking for it now, but I'm just saying the resources out there, but it's important, I think, for residents to see. Same thing with property tax when we make our decisions as a council and sales tax. Second item, I know that on revenues that the property tax and the state shared revenues are pretty, there's a huge lag of a couple of years, or there's a lag so that we can calculate with some reasonable certainty what those amounts might be from the state. Well, the state does that, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Tandy, we know the state shared income tax with reasonable certainty. That is one that lags by 2 years. The property tax is amount that is set by mayor and council policy through the levy. The state shared sales tax is a component that we forecast and evaluate along with information that we receive from the Arizona League of Cities and Towns that they receive from other sources that are more intimately involved in those revenues.
Right. So the one revenue that is a little more up and down or has the potential is the sales tax, and it's such a big portion of our budget. And I know we get reports on that. It's a lag of a couple months, though. Yes. And because of our project, the ongoing large project, I don't know if we'll be able to get any insight in time before we have to make our decisions. But is there a way to look in a little closer to cut that down to, say, a month and say, what is our best assessment? I know all the numbers won't be in, but will we be able to see any trends?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Tandy, the local sales tax does lag a good 2 months for us. So when you are at the retail location, you pay the sales tax that month. They are responsible for remitting the sales tax to the state in the following month, and then the state remits that data and that sales tax to us the next month. So really, we're kind of tied to that 2-month lag. So we might be able to reach out to the state and try to get a little bit better insight. So I think that will be helpful towards the end of May if we can do that. And also, one last comment. You don't need to do it tonight, but my first item that the council, agenda item the council took up and approved was the financial policy to strive towards the highest credit rating, and we've already gotten some credit rating upgrades, and I appreciate that. So if towards this process, before we put it all down and sign off on it, if you could also highlight some steps we've taken towards that, and how it's basically it's a good news story that we can talk about the city, but also what steps do you feel that taken in this budget also help towards contributing towards that, because I do think it's a very important priority. But other than that, I think it's very good what you've done here. Interesting, and I think I understand it. I'm still going to read every line of it, though. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Hall, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mike. I forgot to ask this earlier. We added a solid waste inspector and supervisor last year. Remember?
This year.
Or this year. Yeah, FY16, the one we're in. Okay, and the diversion rate needle hasn't moved a bit.
Well, so Mayor, Councilmember Hall, so I'd like to say that progress has been made. Of course, time will tell the truth of that, right? But we had a really impressive communications emphasis on what are appropriate recyclables and whatnot to try to decrease the contamination rate within our recycling. And we are doing some things to emphasize recycling within our program. but the results of the changes that you approved recently won't necessarily be evident in our numbers for months at a time. So while council did approve 2 additional FTE positions, one of those has been filled so far. The second one hasn't yet been filled. It's still vacant today because we hired someone and someone else got promoted and they moved along. And so we've never been able to add the actual additional staff.
Okay.
We're in the process of interviewing and recruiting for it now. So the changes and emphasis we're putting on recycling, I believe, will yield results. And then there of course is ebbs and flows with garbage in general seasonally, and so some of the numbers that we have currently, are going to be based off of like say up to December numbers or something like that, and then of course the winter visitors are going to have a higher recycling rate hopefully, and by the next time we report it'll be better diversion rate.
Okay.
Our goal was 25%, and I think we'll get closer to it, but I don't know that we'll get to 25% this year. Next year we should be able to exceed 25%.
Okay, because last year we were at 25%.
23%.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't much. So, and remember when we initially talked about it, we thought adding those 2 people, we'd actually recover their cost in recycling.
A significant portion of their cost in recycling.
Yeah, we said it was going to be a break even, and then we could work on it. So I'm thinking, okay, FY17 starts in 2 months. We have both guys. We have that position filled. So FY17, it's both positions are filled, and we can really measure what the recycling increase is. So you can get kind of a commitment.
Yes, Councilman Hall. The one caveat I put it just that our operations are continually yielding new information, and right now we are evaluating all of our expenses and revenues in the solid waste fund itself,
Yep.
and making adjustments to make sure that we can live within the rates that were passed by council.
Right.
And so it's possible that even though our intention was to increase, the FTEs there, that we might decide to manage a vacancy, as we were talking about earlier, to help ensure that we can, keep our rates stable.
Okay.
And so we're having those discussions, all the time, but it's possible that we won't have those positions filled.
There was one thing that we talked about, as I'm refreshing my memory, is we talked about communication to the residents, about how important recycling is, and giving them information that they can use when they're saying, can I recycle this, or does that go in the trash, or you know what I'm saying? And I haven't seen a lot of that. And I think education is a key component to recycling, Mike. And so whatever we can do, I just want to see it. I want to see it move. I don't want to see FY18 being we're projecting 25%, because that's the same as we've been doing. Come on.
The recycling supervisor that you approved the position for was officially hired at the beginning of March. So we're just 30 days into his career with City Surprise. The full inspectors, my hope would be that they will be filled by the end of this fiscal year. And I want to see that needle move too. Recycling is my life, Councilman. You're speaking my language.
All right, Mike. Got you, buddy. That's good. Hey, a couple other things, and then I'll. This might be unpopular, okay? This is just me, Hall speaking, but I think travel and training with the City Council should be broken out by district so that we're accountable. That's just me, okay? I think it plays into transparency. We want, and especially since everybody, the Arizona Republic and a lot of our individual city papers have been focusing on travel. Look what happened to the Valley Metro CEO, okay? And that got blasted all over. And then everybody is going and looking at government organizations saying, okay, what's the travel? How much travel do you guys do? And then you look at that yo-yo in Glendale, whatever his name is.
Councilmember Hall, if we could
I want
from making.
But anyway, he goes out and blows a bunch of money and goes to Washington, and anyway, it's for not see reasons. So anyway, what I'm saying is it's on the top of the mind of the media, and I think when we lump it all together, we're saying, hey, we're not transparent. We don't. Okay. And I think it ought to be broken down by district and the mayor. That's just me. The other thing is that I think our community outreach should be increased. We did have it at 75,000, and we reduced it to 50. And we've had a lot of demand for community outreach. Am I wrong? You guys are on the committee. We've had a lot of and good projects. There were community outreach projects, and I think I'd like to see it increased. That's me, from 50 to 75.
Do you have a number?
75.
75?
Yeah, the way it used to be. For some reason, we decided to move it back.
No,
or
you're
something.
talking. Oh, you're talking
community
about
outreach.
going by individual district.
No, the Community Outreach Fund, which we have a subcommittee
Right.
that awards it or makes a recommendation for award. That's the one I'm talking about.
So you want to increase it
to 75.
to 75?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So that's just me. Then the last thing is Jared, you and I talked about this, but I really want this to happen. Okay, there's a foundation. I think it's called the Tax Foundation of America, and they take state by state, and they evaluate income tax, property tax, sales tax, use tax, all the taxes, and they rank states by tax burden. Okay? I would like to see that in terms of, if we're going out for this bond, because they evaluate secondary, primary, the whole thing on property tax. And just because when people say, we're overtaxed in Arizona, and I say, no, we're really not. I mean, when you compare us, but then I'm doing it by, putting my finger in the wind. I'd really like some data on where we rank as a state in terms of the rest of the states in the union in terms of tax burden. Okay? Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay.
But, Madam Chair, on two items that were just discussed, could we get at least a look from the rest of the council on the two items Councilmember Hall raised? The first one being how we break out travel for your team, and is
I have a comment.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take the opposing view,
Okay.
And here's why. Because each and every month there's a report generated on who spent what. So that's very transparent and open. And it's posted, is it not?
Yes.
So it's very easy to access that travel and training report. When we act as a council, and so I think we are traveling as a council, we are training as a council, and sometimes the needs of individual travelers are different than others.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And
but
so
let's
what
budget for it. Let's
But
budget
if
for it.
it's all in one, it's all in one budget.
Yeah.
And it does not put, which I've seen in the past, does not put an individual council person in a position of having to beg from the dais for somebody else's travel budget. And I've seen it happen. And I've seen it happen on equipment. I've seen it happen on travel. This is years past. And this has worked pretty well because it's all out there, but it's out accounted for every month. So it's all very open, very transparent. But you don't put a council member in a position of having to ask the mayor or somebody else for part of their budget because they've gone over because of a different need. And so I think it works better because it's still open and transparent, and it's not caused any problems in the last couple of years since we've done it that way. But I do believe that we need to make a real concerted effort to make sure that each and every month those reports are posted, because that's really critical. And I don't think, in fact, I think there was a newspaper article recently that talked about how Surprise actually goes above and beyond than most places in terms of transparency in that particular issue.
But the article said the travel and training the council did over the past year was X. And it was total council. It was not Skip Hall, John Williams, Roland Williams, whatever. It was, as a group, here's what they spent.
But that's not the way it's reported.
Well,
it's not the way it's reported. It's actually reported by individual who spent the money. And if the paper chose to do an X, that's not the way it was reported on the
I've never seen the report you're talking about.
It's online.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Tandy?
Yeah, I actually am very, I really like transparency also. So I actually, before I joined council, probably 2 or 3 years before, I actually went to my council member, Councilmember Williams, and said, hey, I got this idea. And I said, hey, you know, the community's kind of wondering what's going on with the city finances. Can we have a financial transparency portal? And so he got me a meeting with the city manager at that time. And we went through and I talked it through and I said, here's some examples of portals that worked really well. And it's relatively easy to do. You just match it up with a flat file or right in. So we actually do have that. If you search on It's Your Money, and it's right on the website. It'll break it down. It'll tell how much you and I make.
So what's
It'll say how much we each travel.
What's the difference of budgeting it? What's the problem with budgeting it by district and by council member? What's the problem with that? If this report comes out, so what's the difference? What's the problem? I don't get the problem. I understand that there's a report, okay, but what's that got to do with budgeting? Why not budget for it?
I understand what your point is, but I don't get the problem that we currently have because it's all being reported. It's very open and transparent.
Okay, because if somebody wants to travel, how do they know they're not going over the council budget by the end of the year because other people have spent it? How do you know?
Well, it's all tracked through our office. I think our staff and we
But see, I would rather just track myself. Why do I have to track everybody else? I'd rather just have it by district.
As a former chief financial officer, it makes it a lot easier to administer if it's all in a bigger budget. As long as the transparency there, I'm comfortable with that. But I also hear what you're saying. And I think we all have an assistant. And I think maybe a better solution would be if say, you have a trip planned, we can get into a queue with our assistant and say, hey, I'm planning to go at this point, and it's going to cost this much. And we can do that you can actually forecast through the entire 12 months of the calendar year. In fact, that's how I did on every line item in all of my budgets. So I think that's an easy way to
Why don't we do
administer
that with discretionary funds? Why don't we have just a glump total for discretionary funds? What's the difference?
Well,
I don't see the difference.
We could do the same thing there, except the discretionary funds were handled by the Rules Committee, I believe, and it was laid out how much each council member would have. So we could go back to the Rules Committee and put it all in one budget and try to do the same thing again.
Yeah.
But the concern there...
Maybe if I could suggest, we'll try to do some research and see if we can come up with a creative way to be able to do this, to provide the transparency and clarity that's being discussed here, and see what other organizations, if there's best practices, and come back to you with the solution.
Vice Mayor?
No. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think that really would be helpful. To be frank with you, I was not aware of the report either, and I think maybe that's where the flaw is in the whole process. You know, whether it's a monthly or whether it's a bi-monthly or whatever it happens to be. I think if there is an individual breakdown, as has been suggested, I've not seen it, but I think it'd be important that we be proactive about making sure that's out there and seen by everyone. And then with what you might do, City Manager, I think that might help us through that project. I do want to say something about the community outreach, because I agree with what Councilmember Hall's point. Historically, and that goes back about 4 or 5 years, I think, when it was first initiated. And it was initiated at $50,000, and that seemed to work well for the first year or two. But then as it became known, there were more and more demands on that. I don't think we ever actually increased that to 75. There was a lot of discussion when our previous grants administrator was here about trying to match that with some additional grant funding and then build that to 75 and possibly to 100. But for a lot of reasons that didn't occur. And then we got involved in the discussion about coordinating community outreach funds and grants. So that, for example, we just heard tonight, as we do every year, the 15% portion of the community development block grant that goes obviously to a more targeted population, but that's community outreach funds in the sense of Benavia, for example. Benavia has also applied for the other community outreach and has been granted funds. So we talked about all the coordination of all the funds, the community outreach funds that are out there. But this was intended to be that general community open for application, anyone who wanted to apply, and we always got far more demands than we were able to even come close to filling. So I would encourage also an increase of that to $75,000 of that specific community outreach fund.
$75,000.
Councilmember Villanueva?
Did he say 75,000?
Yes.
It's 50.
Councilwoman?
I just want to say that I think the need for the community outreach is there. I think it's nice for different communities to have their own little projects that we don't touch, and it's for the betterment of the whole city. On the other hand, I wanted to just say a word about what Councilman Hall mentioned. I think that people that have been on the council for a long time feel maybe at one time they traveled and they learned just like the students today. And new council that comes on also would like to learn and also would like to, mix with other communities or other states or whatever and bring information and be aware of what's out there. But, to deny new councilmen to not travel, I think it's not right.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear. And just to be clear, nobody has been denied.
Not yet, but...
So if I hear what you're saying, if you could look at those, I think that I didn't know that the council didn't know that there were reports that were already online. But if we can perhaps even make that in a more visible porthole, part of the porthole or the website, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
And certainly that will help people see who's traveling and how much they're paying.
And we will do so. But just looking at all of you, would you like us to then raise the fund, Councilman?
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. So in reference to the community outreach, I just want clarification. Are we talking about 501c3s? Or are we talking about how we divided the funds and we had $10,000 go to neighborhoods and residents and $40,000 go to the 501c3 component to that? I just want clarification in terms of what you guys meant.
Yeah.
65 and 10.
65 and 10?
Yeah. I think that, if I may.
So that would be 65 for the projects and 10 for the local neighborhoods.
The local initiatives.
Right.
Okay, I would favor the increase regardless. I think what we've seen in the past couple of years is a lot of repeating 501c3s coming back to the table. So I have concerns with that. I like the way the neighborhood component rolled out, and I think there's a lot of potential there. I think the problem there was what I heard out in the community. They just weren't aware of it, and it was just a very condensed time frame. I think now, maybe going another year at 10,000, it's just another pilot year.
And I think that's the same experience that we had the first time when we ran through the program at 50. Yeah. We didn't get as many applicants as we thought. But I have to share with you the same concern because it's not there to become the sustainable funding source for any individual 501c3. It's to help them with the project or help them get started.
Correct.
But it's certainly not
almost
there.
Seed money, and you want them to stand on their own two legs and not sustain it over a 3-5 year period.
Correct.
And just in terms of Councilmember Hall, and I mean, I am indifferent in terms of how we approach. I will tell the world right now, I go to the Arizona League of Cities Conference, and I've gone to Washington every year the last 4 or 5 years. I think there's value in both of them, and I go to both of them for different reasons. I think there's different value. I think it's just the question becomes a matter of transparency. I think if we budget it, regardless of district or as a whole, I'm indifferent. I think the biggest question in terms of what I took out of recent media play is folks that took advantage of it. Folks, we're not in this position to get rich or get poor. We should never be in either position. I'm not going to pay to go to the League of Cities Conference because that's not personally what I want to do with my money. I'll take my family to Disneyland then. So it's part of the job, and when it gets utilized as a personal resource, and hey, there's a great trip in Vegas and then there's another trip in Honolulu, I think I'll go to those instead, and then it becomes questioning. And I don't know of anyone on here in the last 8 years, 9 years that has taken advantage of that. But there has to be a process where I can, if anybody in my district, and put it on my webpage. Hey, this is Councilmember Williams' travel expenses. Put it on there. Put my face there and the budget line items right next to it. If it's a matter of transparency, I'm open to anything that we come up with. So,
okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So
Councilwoman Villanueva, actually, Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilman Hall's point, on page 69 of the budget, it actually does point out the different districts' federal mileage allowance that, for some reason, it stopped in 2015.
Right.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I
2016
don't know why
on
either.
is nothing.
Yeah, it used to be in 2015. It was all broken out. I don't know why it stopped.
Is there an explanation for how that
This is just
stopped?
pointed out in mileage, and not, it's
I'm
not
sorry,
pointing
for
out
which
much money
line
is
item?
spent, but
Councilmember Winters points out on page what?
69.
69.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, which line item are you looking at on page 69?
Go at the bottom. It starts calling out the districts.
Districts, federal mileage.
So, Madam Chair, Councilmember Winters, as Mayor stated, the expenditures are recorded in the actual line items in which they are incurred for the districts. The budgets, as directed by Council a number of years ago, were rolled up into the line items. And so you'll see the mileage, the federal mileage for the Council as a whole should be in one line item, and then the actuals are in the other. So that's why the fiscal year 16 adopted amount doesn't show a budget for it, because the budget's in another line.
Right, it wasn't budgeted. Wasn't budgeted.
The budget is in lump sum. The expenditures are in detail.
Oh, okay.
So somehow it stopped. It used to be,
For whatever reason.
It used to be broken out by district, and somehow it stopped.
No, I think, Councilmember, what I think for several years it's been budgeted as in a lump, but then as it's expended, we put it in which district it is.
Right.
So that's why you're seeing.
Why is 2016 zero?
Because we haven't concluded 2016 yet.
So when 2016 gets concluded,
That'll fill in.
It'll be filled in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've got one more thing, Mayor.
Councilmember Hall.
Okay. I'm looking through the City Council strategic plan. Okay, and it's something that there's been a lot of effort put in over the years, and I just want to make sure that we're all reading off the same sheet of music. When I look at transportation, sustainability, economic development, community lifestyle, tourism, public safety, and education, I think we're doing about a C- on transportation. We need a lot more focus on transportation, okay? Sustainability, we're doing great, okay? It's like an A- or B. Economic development, B-, okay? Community lifestyle, I don't know, that's an interesting one. I don't know how to evaluate that exactly. Tourism, we get an F. We haven't done anything on the tourism strategic plan. I don't know who's working on it, what's going on, but lay the groundwork for creating a multi-use facility that will draw entertainment and tourism. Zero. Develop an annual festival framework, 0. Develop a regional entertainment corridor. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing on that. It takes private partners for that, but okay. Create partnerships that offer visitors a wide range of non-baseball activities. I don't know. Okay. So what I'm saying is that, and public safety, we're doing a very good job. Very good job. I'd say a B+, A-. Education, not bad. We had some pretty good effort on education. But tourism and transportation, Bob, is where we need some real help, focusing on those two areas of our strategic plan, because we totally forgot about tourism. Nobody spent any time on it, and transportation. There's a whole thing, I want to bring it up right now. MAG is supposed to be rebalancing the Prop 400 funds. And I met with Scott Smith last week at Valley Metro, and I said, look, here's the numbers that Surprise residents have paid into Proposition 400, and here's what we've got out of it. And there's a big gap of what we got out, what we put in. And it's about our time. They rebalanced the last time in 2009. That's 7 years ago. So whatever we can do at MAG, Martine, I wish Martine was here. I met with Dave Kobeck about this. He sent a memo to an email to Martine. Martine never answered me or Dave Kobeck. But Martine goes to those RTAG meetings down there at MAG, and I think you're on the executive committee. But
No,
we need to be at that table on rebalancing. We need to get transit money in Surprise. And I don't want them telling us, well, you got to kick in X to get connected to the bus. We've already kicked in X. Proposition 400 money. Okay, so come on. And that's so I hope you're as passionate about this as I am, because this is
never.
Okay. No, really.
Councilmember Hall, completely, absolutely, and I think that anyone who's ever attended a MAG meeting can attest to the fact that I'm very passionate about this. And I agree with you that it is our turn. We should have been at the table in 2009 and said, no, we're not going to balance out of the program. We should have stood up for ourselves, but there was no voice at the table standing up for ourselves in 2009. And we can't let that happen again in the rebalancing of Prop 400. So I agree with you, and there's been, I know staff is looking at how to work through that and come up strategically through that. I know that Nicole has also been working with some outside consultants about how we can strategically work through that process as well. I think you and I, because you're on the Valley Metro and I'm on the MAG, should communicate more closely and stay in direct contact, because now's the time is of the essence right now, and we are in the process. I'll be heading to the TPC to listen to what MAG is going to present. And I don't think that the picture that MAG is going to present is going to look overly favorable in our direction, unless we stand together.
Yeah.
So it is very important that we stand together and committed to making certain that we get our fair share of transportation.
Wasn't there an RTAG meeting today? Today's Tuesday, right? But there was an RTAG meeting today. Martine was supposed to be there because Colbeck's out of town. So Martine was supposed to be at that meeting. I haven't heard a thing about any results of that meeting. I just want to make sure that we're at the table, we have a voice, and we get our fair share of Proposition 400 money.
And all of that process really begins through the staff technical meetings and works its way up. So that's why I think staff has been working together to try to put together a strategy, and I think they are committed to finding the strategy of getting us in, at the table.
So maybe Nicole needs to brief me on what that strategy is and whether I agree with it. Okay, because Valley Metro is only going to execute on what MAG says. They don't extend bus routes. MAG extends bus routes. Okay. They put the bus on the road and they put a driver in the bus and pick people up. But MAG funds the route. Okay. And so we've got to be there. And yeah, the communication has got to take place. I need to know about this stuff. It doesn't help me or the city of Surprise to find out about this stuff at a Valley Metro meeting that MAG is rebalancing. I should have been told about that before I went to the Valley Metro meeting. So
Actually,
if you got information with Nicole and her strategy, then share it, and she should share it with me.
Okay. And you and I will sit down and try to get each other up to speed on what we know. Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. I am sure glad to see Councilman Hall as passionate about this as I am. We have to be careful when we talk about transportation. A lot of times they talk about transportation as buildings and bridges. We have to make sure we're talking about transit if we're talking about transit. And that's my question previously. We first opened this conversation about a budget. Where's our 400 money? Let's go get it. Thank you.
Okay. Just first of all, I want to thank you two for putting this budget together. You've done a great job. You've heard a lot of feedback from the council. I think that clearly this is probably one of the easiest budgets to just grasp, understand. And quite frankly, because we are a lean and mean operation, it makes it a little easier to understand that there's not a whole lot of, there's no hidden agenda anywhere. There's no hidden fluff. We're very forthright about how we're going about spending the taxpayers' dollars and trying to get the best bang for the buck. And I do appreciate that. To Councilmember Hall's point, if we want a transportation system, we're going to have to get in the game, but we're also going to have to pay for it, because no city that has an active transportation plan and an active transportation system, transit system specifically, can function without matching funds. So you've got to be able to pay for it at the local level. You can go get what your fair share is that you believe exists at the MAG, but if you can't pony up your fair share, the MAG is going to take that money and balance it someplace else, that somebody who can match that money. So there are a couple of different strategies that I think that we ought to be working on together, and I think it would be helpful because of Councilmember Hall's and my membership of the two regional committees on transportation, that if we pulled together a strategy with the rest of our staff together and make sure that we are in the game and in the hunt. But also, council members, if we come back and we recognize that we need to deal with a long-term strategy of where we're going to get the local match dollars, you need to be ready to pay for it, because it's not going to come from the moon. And it's a spendy item, quite frankly. So I'm passionate about it, as you are, Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Winters. I think that it's part of the long-term strategy for not only tourism, is to have another way to get here by transit, but also part of the revitalization of our original town site with transit. I think it's also a part of our strategy of creating more jobs. If ever there's an opportunity to bring a university here, and transit connectivity is going to be a very, very big part of that. So we've focused this year's budget on public safety. But right now, I think I'm hearing again and again, we're hearing gap jobs, we're hearing transit, we're hearing a whole nother focus on strategic portions of the strategic plan that have not been addressed. And so it's something that we all need to be on notice that we have to think about, because I agree with Councilmember Hall that there are certain pieces that we just haven't gotten to. We have been busy, and I gotta commend our staff, because you've done an amazing job with what we've had to work with, and I appreciate the real focus, and I think the timely focus of public safety this year. So whatever we can do to think strategically on funding long-term strategies on transit is going to be critical. And I don't have any specific questions that haven't already been addressed in the budget. But I do think that the city is in very good hands with our city management and with our finance staff and all of you. I think you've all done an amazing job, and I thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any further questions on this particular item. We have council reports, and I will begin, Councilmember Tandy, with you.
Thanks. Just a couple items of note. I'm real happy that we're starting to complete some of our local road projects. The first one was actually completed ahead of schedule. We've got another one that's been completed by one of our developers. Developers build a lot of our roads here in Surprise. Another one looks like it's getting close to being done, and then a couple more that should be done in the next few weeks as well. So I really am happy that we're making real good progress on that, and I think the community will like that. Also real excited about, it's a little advance notice, but since we probably won't meet until after that, I'm looking real forward to the grand opening of Iris USA next May 3rd, I believe. It's a Tuesday, and because it is on a Tuesday when we normally have the council meeting, we'll be having our council meeting on the following day on Wednesday. But I'm glad we're not going to miss that event, because that's a huge event, not only for District 6, but for the entire city of Surprise, because I think they're going to help us attract additional businesses going forward, just because they've made that decision to invest here in Surprise. So things are looking real up in my district, and I'm real happy about it.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to share one thing. There was a workshop for the job fair put on Friday by Seth Dyson and his group. Just a super invigorating environment. There was over 40 people showed up, and I thought the presentations that I saw were very good, very usable. You know, usually when you get in those kind of environments, people come and then they go, and they leave. No, this had big stickiness. People stuck in the room, okay? And so just a great job. Then today, they had the job fair, and I went to the job fair, and it was like a beehive in there. I think we had, well, when I left, there was about 140 people had been there looking for a job. We had Cobalt Medical there. We had Iris. In fact, Iris made 4 job offers before I left to people. Hyundai, new dealership that's opening in October, was there. Honda is opening in August. They were there. Cobalt Medical was there. Anyway, it was really super, and I just commend Seth and his whole team, you know. And was Rick involved too? Good job, Rick. I mean, really, it was just a fantastic job fair. People were really happy. They were getting to talk to people. The employers were happy. It was just super. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Councilwoman Villanueva. There you go.
I just want to commend the police department for this report that you put out. I think it's so well stated of where we have our crimes going on, and I see where it's all over the city. And I know that your police department is very busy. But what I wanted to ask you is that, can we utilize these maps for our communities?
Yes.
And let the families know, or the residents know exactly where.
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
Can we? What's the matter?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted permission because I think they're. What's the matter?
He's giving you a hard time. He's just giving you a hard time.
No, I really think it's focused exactly where, what kind of crime we have, and where it's taking place, and I think our residents need to know this.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very good report, and I want to thank you for it.
Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one thing I want to talk about was the Friday night police bonanza we had at the stadium. It was a fantastic event that the police department put on. It was a great event, Chief Young. It's really nice, and the whole family was invited, so it was really great to see. They are family men, believe it or not, and they have a lot of great kids out there and wives, and we had a good time, show our appreciation, except we have to get the weatherman next year, Chief, to make sure it's not windy. Blew the hot dog right into my hand. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, I just want to thank Chief Young and Mike Gent for coming to HOA meeting last week. The crowd wasn't there, but for Bob Wiggenroth and the entire staff, we're so accessible as a city, and it's really there's a degree of pride that you have with these people that work for this city, and how accessible they are and how open they are to conversations, and they never say no to that. So I really appreciate it, because I just had to sit there and look nice. I'm turning over to you, Mike. I really appreciate them coming out after a long wait. Yeah, he did. And one of the things that Chief Young impressed upon, and from our police department, it's kind of the same thing we've heard, or I've heard from the dais for 9 years, and as a resident for 16 years. But lock up your stuff. Lock your cars, lock your house.
Close your garage.
95% of the crime that they covered in this specific HOA area was all related to somebody left a laptop in their car, or that kind of stuff. And just being able to mitigate that just statistically makes us look like a super safe city. So just commending our staff on that. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Winters and I attended, was it Friday, an event by the Northwest Valley Veterans Association. They did a memorial tribute to a person by the name of Kilmer, who was a World War II veteran. And he passed away recently, but his wife was also at the event. And she got up and spoke about how he initiated, implemented what they call a parade of flags over in Sun City West, which is really a nice event that they have. But it was a nice tribute to Kilmer, who is an inductee in the Veterans Hall of Fame.
I just wanted to respond to, and I know we've all heard it in the past. We've had members of the community who have come forward and saying, what are you doing for the original town site? When are we ever going to have some sort of a plan for revitalization of the original town site? And this is something that is very near and dear to my heart and to Councilwoman Villanueva's heart, to have finally come forward with a plan. And as of tomorrow night, community meetings will be held to inform residents of the Surprise Heritage District Plan. And the goal of this project is to advance the revitalization of our city's original town site, which is the 1 square mile in size. And if approved, this new zoning district will create 2 associated zoning overlays that focus on residential and commercial revitalization. The proposed Heritage District is a very important project. So please, if you want to know more about it, visit surpriseaz.gov for a complete listing of the community meetings, which begin tomorrow night, and I believe that Councilwoman Villanueva is hosting the first one. Kudos to the entire community of the original town site for all the time that they have spent bringing forward their thoughts and their ideas. I will say kudos to former planner Jackie Keller, who did such a tremendous job of helping assemble this plan. I think it's a big deal, and I'm really excited that we're finally to that point where we're almost ready to adopt it, so I encourage people to get involved. Also, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, in partnership with the Surprise Police Department, will be hosting a citizen safety forum this Thursday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., and this event's going to be held at the Sun City Grand Sonoran Plaza. Will feature an array of safety presentations, and residents can also bring and safely dispose of prescription and over-the-counter medical prescriptions at the event. The safety forum is free, which also includes lunch, but advanced registration is required to attend, and residents can register by calling 602-506-7621. Finally, I want to encourage all the residents to sign up for Deal of the Day. If you haven't done it, this thing is ringing off the hook. I swear, our staff and the chamber has done an amazing job with the Deal of the Day for Shop Surprise. All you have to do is text the word Shop Surprise as one word to 40518, and you can also visit shopsurprise.az.com for all the current deals being offered by our local businesses. Let's all band together. I know we already are. Every time I go to the shopping center, that shopping mall is packed. I was there for breakfast this weekend, and I have to tell you that one of the breakfast places a little bit further up was not that busy, but biscuits, you couldn't get in. Yeah. So I'm telling you that our retailers are working hard to bring that draw into the mall, and I'm really proud of all of them and how hard they are working together to try to help each other out. Our main anchors and some of the small businesses working with our Chamber of Commerce to create these deals of the day. Great stuff. So kudos to all for their involvement, and kudos to our departments for being so engaged in this project and making it work well. I did neglect to ask if there were any items for a future agenda. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I have two. One, I would like to discuss and have action regarding the Boys and Girls Club and the charter for the Boys and Girls Club. And two, I would like a presentation from the CRS department regarding the youth satellites, Sierra Montana and Countryside. Thank you.
Is there a second for that?
Second there.
I second the motion.
Okay. Anyone else?
Got 3 seconds.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to have a discussion and action about joining the White Tank Mountains Conservancy. It really is right on the edge of our city, and we're probably might be one of the last ones to actually join this organization. I think it deserves some conversation and thought and possible some action. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring that up to speed. Okay, super. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. We have no executive second. We have no executive session for this evening, so I'll entertain a motion. A motion has been made to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned.
Have you heard? The bell